Okay, wanted to show some of the softwares in the advanced PLC class. So, starting with the Click programs, this is basically a stoplight program, and I added a clock to it, and so you can see my inputs, basically turn the cycle on and off. And I've also got it set up on the HMI, although I don't have that HMI called up. So I can select or turn on my cycle from my HMI, but I don't have that HMI program. And then I've got my standard start stop. I just made it to where you can start and stop it from two different places. So you can see that the stop button are in series because either one will work, and the start buttons are in parallel because either one will work. I've got subroutines, stoplight outputs, just like we did. I'm actually using the memory locations in the PLC because that is how I would get them to my HMI. Timers, I've got them set up. I think it's the 6 or the 7 we did. Yeah, 6 timers and 2 blink timers. Pretty straightforward what we did in the intro class. And then my clock, I'm basically timing. Let's see, in seconds. And I'm counting minutes and hours. So I'm timing seconds, counting minutes and hours in my subroutine. To create a subroutine, main program, I think it's right mouse click on the ladder, right? Or is it right mouse click on the subroutine? There you go. Right mouse click on subroutine, and you can add a new subroutine, and you can call it whatever you want to. We used the click a lot in the intro class because we had to. Data view. And I went in and I put in my data view so I could test my program real time. We did some of that in the class. This is how you make sure your program will actually work. You got to have a PLC. I don't happen to have a PLC connected to it right at the moment. So that is my PLC program. In general with Click, if I do my outputs to memory locations, C10, C11, C12, I can then pull them into an HMI. Now, I have an HMI program pulled up, but it's not associated with this program. So this is the C-More micro program, version 435, and it's on the desktop, and it's just get the latest. So basically, this is for one of those really tiny screens we got. And so I've got it set up to show the RPM of a motor, turn on and off a speed reference, basically a potentiometer, show the output milliamps, and show the potentiometer milliamps. So I can double click on one of these and it opens up my programming. So I put in the out milliamps in my tag and my display tag. And if I do the 3 dots, I think I can get into the tag database. There we go. And so for milliamps out, I've got a floating point, which we have mentioned. Different data types. Anytime you're doing milliamps, you'd want to do floating point and a PLC address. So in general, whether you're in Click and C-More Micro, Allen Bradley, or Siemens, You've got to set up the HMI and the PLC program so that they can trade information. And so the PLC address is DF04, so I'm using the same address from the PLC, and my device name is device 01, and I'm allowing it to read and write. So I'm letting the screen read and write to it. Let's see. So I'm going to close that for a minute, and I'm going to say okay there. One of the things you got to make sure of is, and I always click the wrong place, panel. No, setup and panel manager. So here's my panel, and I would select the panel I've got based on what is in there. And then on the back of the panel, you have different COM ports and possibly an Ethernet port. So what you have to do is you have to tell the communication path between the panel and the device or the PLC. So you have to configure that. This would be the little white cable that we use to locally program. So it's going to come out of the panel and go into the PLC. And so you basically have to tell it how it's communicating. In the advanced class, you can probably do Ethernet port, in which case it's not going to let me add or modify. Ah, there we go. New. Okay, so I only have one communication per device. So I would go in and configure my Ethernet port based on the IP address. So your panel can have an IP address, your computer can have an IP address, and your PLC can have an IP address. If you manage that well and set it up correctly, then you can Ethernet everything on the big network. Let's see, database, tag name database. This is all my tags. So earlier I showed you the floating points that were, there was 3 of them, and then there was 2 that were discrete. So my PLC address. And so it can read and write from the coil inputs and outputs in a ClickPLC, and it can also read and write to the milliamps that I have configured. As far as layout and design of a panel, basically you want your buttons far enough apart that you can make them with 2 fingers. If you sort of follow that rule on these really small panels, that's hard to do. We have some bigger ones, but if you follow that rule, then you'll spread things out and you won't have things so bunched together that would be hard to do. Anyway, I wanted to show that aspect of downloading. And I've got some programs that I will show you on the other side of things. But what I want to do is I want to show you the software. Okay, so if I go there, I don't think I've got the updated Seymour program. The last time I looked, it was the version 4.35. So that didn't change. But if you go to the Click software and you download, you'll get a CD image. And so this will be your setup, install, and your serial driver for locally connecting. And so that's it's important to do if you don't have it already. Most of you, I think, do. If I go to the Click side, the PLC side, and is it set up? There you go. COM port, Ethernet IP setup. You can set up your Ethernet IP. And your COM port, I think, is just the communication port. Yeah. So port 1 can be used Ethernet, port 2. So if I set that up, I can go in and put in an IP address. We are going to set manually, and we'll set up the IP address. I didn't set one up for this particular project yet, but I can do that. If you set up Ethernet, you're in pretty good shape. Let's see, port 1. So now I can set up my Ethernet. Port 1, client. And you can get back and forth. Port 2. Protocol Modbus. And not doing a whole lot with that. Port 3 is definitely Modbus. You could actually set up a RS-485 port on there. Let's click OK. Advanced PLCs is about looking around. You sort of got to get the impression that I know I can make it do this. It's just a matter of figuring out how. And the steps are okay. Ethernet IP setup. That should take me back to the same screen. Nope, it didn't. I think this is where I can share and read things between different computers. Let's see. System configuration. I did want to show you something here. I've just got this set up as a basic click. I can add a power supply. Most of you, I think, got that one. The CO1 AC. And so you would add a power supply. If you add I/O to your ClickPLC, you can select what I/O you've added, and you would have to add it into the page. This is part of your project setup. Now, if you don't do this, it won't see that input. Like I just added an input card. It won't see it. Once you add it here, it will see it in the program, and it will show up an address picker, and you can actually use it. If you put a card on there and you don't configure it here, then the click will ignore that card. So it won't see any inputs and outputs. Allen Bradley's the same thing, and Siemens is the same thing. Now, in the Siemens, we're going to have something like a click. It's going to be a brick. It's going to have a lot of I/O, but then we're going to add components to it, so we'll have to figure out how to do that. And in Allen Bradley, we start with a processor, and all our I/O has to be added. So it's a similar process across the different softwares, and it's just a matter of figuring out the ways to do it. One thing you probably want to do with your Click PLC is you probably want to go ahead and name it. Your student name can be first name, last initial. I don't think we'll have any problems if we use that. And that way, when you're on the network, when we do connect your PLC to the network, you'll be able to find it easily. And that would just be a good thing to have. If you put on a card you don't like, you can certainly remove it, and then see as you add one, then it gives you the ability to add the next one, depending on how you do. It also keeps track of your power budget. So this power supply will do 1.3 amps. The PLC does 140. This particular card does 30. So as you add cards, you can see if this number ever gets red, you don't have enough power for your configuration. And that's an important thing to keep up with when you're programming, that sometimes you have to have more power or a bigger power supply. Cancel that so it doesn't prompt me to save changes. So that's the click side that I wanted to show you. I hope most of you feel pretty comfortable with doing things in Click. All righty. Let's see now. How do I turn off the record? I don't care about the stop share. I just want to, oh, there we go. Stop record.